Hey, what's up, Dave? How you doing? Long time no see.
Good to be here, Joe. It's been a long
Yeah,
time. Too long.
it has been. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we met during COVID. I think you presented at my meetup. We did some podcast way back in the day. But yeah, but see your posts on online a lot. Still a huge fan of what you're doing. So it's
I
awesome,
take
man.
that as a compliment coming from you, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, anytime,
I do
anytime.
spam the LinkedIn, so I do.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, what have you been up to over the last few years?
So I got laid off in August of 2020 from the startup I was working at, like a lot of folks
Yeah,
back then, because lockdowns were just wreaking havoc with everybody. And then I started a solo entrepreneur company. I do training and consulting work in the analytics space. Been growing that slowly but surely. So
cool.
past couple of years, thankfully, as COVID's receded, opportunities for training and going to conferences and live in-person types of experiences has grown. So I've been doing more and more of that, which is good because that's like one of the things I really love doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I see you. Don't you do some stuff with TWI and a few other places like that?
Yeah, so I partner up with TDWI. We used to
Mhm.
be called the Data Warehousing Institute back in the day, if you're been
Uh-huh.
around a long time like me.
Yeah.
But now they've rebranded themselves Transforming Data with Intelligence. So they do.
Okay, I thought it was like a KFC thing where they're just like it's just letters. So, okay.
KFC stands for Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah.
No,
It
it's not like
does. Um,
it's not like one of those things where it's like the founder's initials or something weird like that. No, it's an acronym. Yeah, they focus on education, professional education, in the data space. So analytics,
mhm.
warehousing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been around for a bit. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I think your shtick, you're sort of the Excel guy, right? So there's all the deep learning stuff and machine learning on Python and R, and there's Dave over here with Excel. Which it's cool. You're still still true to the cause. So that's awesome
Uh,
to see.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of odd that a former software engineer would be the known as the Excel guy.
But you were at Microsoft for a while, so
I did work at Microsoft for a while, and I
mhm.
started my career as a software engineer. So, and back then
Yeah.
I hated Excel. I thought it was the devil,
Oh,
essentially. Oh yeah, I mean, come on now. I'm like, why doesn't everyone just learn SQL and use a database? Why are they using Excel, right? I mean, because
yeah.
I was in my 20s and I was hot. I was a hothead software engineer.
Mm.
Fast
So
forward
if it ain't
20 years later, and here I am evangelizing Excel in simple methods as opposed to, the really cool engineering based stuff like deep learning.
You think 20-year-old Dave would look at you now and just scratch his head like what happened, man? What did you
Oh yeah.
did you go to rehab or something? Like what went wrong in your life?
Yeah, I think so. Like, so 20-year-old Dave was like totally steep C++, object oriented programming, template, STL, all that stuff, right? Totally in. That was the definition of being a legit kind of technologist. And look at me now. I mostly write R. I do Excel. I don't do any object oriented programming really at all.
What?
Haven't for years. Well, you don't need it when you're doing analytics,
Burn this
really.
man.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like 20-year-old Dave would be like, get a rope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious, man. But it is interesting. I think in software engineering, there's definitely some level of heroics and machismo, right? So,
Totally.
Excel is sort of it's sort of like the light hit station if you were to compare it to like heavy metal. It's like yacht
Right.
rock. So,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like back in the day, I was one of those kinds of guys that was like, look, if you don't understand the difference between a pointer to a pointer and a reference to a pointer, you're an idiot. That was was essentially my.
would you say it to your grandma too?
Well, no, not my grandma. She was exempt.
Okay,
Like she's
okay,
a little asterisk, right? She was a little exception to the rule. But like
okay,
anybody who was writing code and they were like, I write VB,
right.
VB6 or something like that, I'd be like, you don't know pointers, you don't know references to pointers. What's wrong with you? You're not a real software
Yeah,
engineer. And
gotta
these days I'm kind of like, whatever. As long as it works, it's fine.
leave. That's awesome. I mean, how did you get into Excel, right? I mean, it's it's a huge platform. I think by some estimates, what 2 billion users or something crazy like that. But
I've seen estimates
maybe
like at
maybe
least
more.
750 million on Hub. So,
Yeah, 700 million to
I
do.
mean, if
Yeah,
depending on if they're teaching in high schools now, I mean, who knows, right? You could count lots and lots of people.
yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, walk me through the transition from being a hardcore software guy to teaching data on Excel. It's a pretty fascinating journey, in my opinion.
Yeah. So from the 20-year-old Dave's perspective, it was that slippery slope that everyone worries about, right?
Would you start smoking weed or something? Like,
Uh, no, it wasn't legal in
oh,
Washington State at that point.
oh yeah, you can't do it if it's legal.
Like it's not like it is now. No, it was just more this idea that I left a software centric job to become an architect, and then so I was a software application architect kind of guy, and then I became an enterprise architect, and then I became a consultant in the systems integration space, and then I got into data warehousing and BI, and it's just like that slippery slope, right? Of like, no, don't take that first step off the off the edge. And that's exactly what I did. And then eventually I got to the point where in my hands-on analytics work, I was stymied. I was blocked. I was even oppressed, dare I say, by leaders and decision makers who were
Mm,
not data literate at all. I mean, and it was just crazy that there's like, look, they were making bad decisions and wasting millions, literally millions of dollars on things. And I'm in the wilderness crying, hey, look, the data's telling us that we shouldn't be doing this anymore. We should go do
it's
something
like,
like
shut up,
this.
dork. I'm making
Right.
decisions.
Right. So then I was like, okay, well, crap. There's a couple things I could do. I can either become a data engineer, like someone I know,
Yeah, I don't know who that would be.
Joe Reese
But
for folks.
you chose evil. So
I chose evil. I chose to stick with it, right? I was like, actually, I don't think of it that way. I think of it as Yoda trying to fight Palpatine, right?
true. Yeah,
The odds are
yeah.
stacked against me, but I'm I'm flipping around with a green lightsaber, trying desperately to win.
You chose good. I chose evil, actually. So
Well, let's
yeah.
not call it. Let's not use those terms.
True, 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 true.
But anytime
You
you can
chose a
weave
path. Yeah.
anytime you can weave a Star Wars reference into a podcast, I mean, come on, you got to do it. So
Well,
anyway, I just
yeah.
got frustrated. Like so many data scientists, quote unquote, analytics people, they just get frustrated with not being able to make impact. And I said,
Yeah.
okay, well, what would be like a judo move, right? I could keep beating my head against the wall until it's flat, or go become a data engineer, or go back in enterprise architecture or whatever. Although that wasn't really an option. No way am I going back to enterprise architecture. But so I said, you gotta meet the users where they live and breathe, right? You got to judo move them. So you have to say, look, you know what? We're gonna start talking their language. We're gonna start using the tools that they use, and just try and start educating them slowly but surely. And that's how I got into Excel. Because look, I think I've seen some posts recently on LinkedIn where they show all these technologies on one side of the image, and on the other side of the image is just the logo for Excel. And they're
Yeah.
like, the tool to beat. I think you actually commented on that post.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's
No,
true.
right. It's true. So I'm like, look, if I want data to have more impact and more value, I got to compete with Excel. I got to embrace it. I got to use it as a judo move. And that's how I started getting into it. And I am by far and away not a Excel expert, right? I use it. I use Power Query a little bit, and I use it. I teach people how to use it, but I'm not like a a super in-depth Excel expert. I use it mainly as an analytical tool, so that's where I
Right.
focus.
Yeah. Isn't there like there's like some quant Excel Olympics or something like that?
Oh, I would.
Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt
yeah.
it.
I think I remember watching that one year. It's like, this is kind of cool. Um, but no, you're absolutely right. You got to meet people where they are, right? That's like the main thing. And yeah, and it's also true that it's just a platform to beat, dude. Like, I see a lot of analytics tools coming out, and then I'm kind of like, yeah, but the other day I was talking to somebody because they were asking. I was giving a talk at this meetup group, and they asked, so what's a good analytics tech stack for a startup? I was like, well, I think you should actually just use a spreadsheet.
Did
So
they throw fruit at you with their pitchforks and torches or anything like that?
I think you got a lot of weird looks, right? Because they're expecting
Yeah.
you to say, "Oh, yeah, definitely spin up a data warehouse and whatnot." But it's like your biggest obstacle when you're starting out, with the company with data isn't the tech. There's no shortage of good tools out there that you could use once you're ready for them. But it's like getting people into the habit of data, right? Of using data, of making decisions with it. That's the hardest part. And the spreadsheet is, well, I mean, if you're in Google, Google or Office, I mean, there are spreadsheets available. You can get started with those.
Mhm.
And the main thing is just get in the habit of like making decisions with data and get people stoked on it and making it a part of the workflow. Because if you can't do that, then it's kind of like I don't know what really else matters. Like what are you going to do? Like spend a lot of money on tools, and then people will be convinced they need to make data-driven decisions.
Yeah, especially these days, right? I mean, look, you want to spin up Snowflake in the cloud and all that kind of goodness, whatever. But you know what? If you're strapped budget-wise, right? If you're bootstrapping yourself or you want to extend your runway, spreadsheet. It's basically free.
Right.
It's basically free. So why bother with all that other stuff until you need it?
Bingo. Yeah, and until you need it's a big thing too. Because I think if you're blessed enough to have the problem of like growing out of a spreadsheet, then congratulations. You should go throw a party with all the money you save from not buying tools. You can go buy a keg, uh, you know, um, some 40s, go to a fun party. So
But if you live in a state with legalization, maybe go get yourself a baggie.
yeah, get a bag. Yeah, go have some fun. But it's like, yeah, because I see a lot of early on, a lot of startups will invest in these data tools, and they have like megabytes of data. It's like laughably small.
Right.
And you spend half your time configuring this stuff. In the meantime, you could just be making decisions. So it's interesting.
I mean, that's kind of like the dirty little secret of analytics,
Mhm.
which is the vast majority of data that counts for most organizations is decidedly small. So Excel is plenty good for
Plenty
so
good.
many things. So many things, whether you're in HR, finance, stuff like that. I mean, yeah, sure. Like if you're dealing with customers, maybe you have millions and millions of customers. If you work for a really big company, great. That's fine. But so many actual real world business problems, megabytes of data.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
As you coach people on Excel, kind of take it back to square one. Um, I'm sure there's a lot of people who use Excel, but do you feel like there's a lot of people who know how to use Excel?
Yeah, I mean that's a spectrum, right? Because when you say know how to use Excel, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Excel is it's like the Swiss Army knife. It's got so many little tools and gadgets on it because Microsoft has just put so much stuff in it over the years. So there are folks that are essentially like, look, I just use it for human-based processes, right? Where we have these weirdly shaped tables and reports that we email it
Mm,
around. There's that level of usage. And then there's also the usage of Excel as an analytics tool. What I tend to find in my work is that folks are pretty good at the former, right? Creating like an Excel workbook that shows data, maybe with a pivot table or something like that, and emailing it around. They're totally good at that, totally competent. But using it as an analytical tool,
mm.
almost beyond pivot tables, I should say, almost nobody. I mean, it's a lot of folks they're like, you could do that in Excel. It's like, yeah, you've been able to do that for years in Excel.
Interesting. Give me some examples.
So pivot charts, for example, great
Mm,
new feature. And using pivot charts allows you to pivot your data in a certain way and then create charts very quickly and easily that are actually difficult to do using standard data visualizations in Excel. For example, creating multi-dimensional visualizations. We're using multiple columns simultaneously in the same visual. Super easy to do using pivot charts, and really, really powerful. I mean, that's essentially the heart of exploratory data analysis, or EDA, right?
mhm.
So what data analysts and data scientists usually do, if they're doing it the right way first, right, is they start exploring the data. And a lot of time they use visualizations and they use multi-dimensional visualizations to drill down into the data and see patterns. So you could do that with pivot charts. And most people are not familiar with that.
Interesting. Interesting. If you were to break out like maybe the 80-20 rule, like what's the 20% of Excel knowledge that'll give you 80% of the results that you need? Like,
Yeah. So once again, I'm gonna decidedly put it in the analytics space because that's
yeah,
where
we're
I
talking about
play.
analytics, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So first up, pivot charts, because that allows you to create those charts that I was talking about. That's EDA, exploratory data analysis. That is like
Yeah.
that's the most basic form of diagnostic analytics there is. And that is definitely in the 20% because so many patterns in business will pop if you do a nice EDA using
Mhm.
a collection of data visualizations, right? And you do it in a structured way, and you do it, thinking about business questions and drilling in the data the right way. Super powerful. Next up is process behavior charts, which come from statistical process control. Way to analyze metrics over time, KPIs over time, any measurement over time. Super, super easy to learn how to use and apply. If you want to get into the background mathematics, you can. If you don't, that's okay too. That's definitely part of the 20%. For example, I use that a lot when I work with executives for creating dashboards. That's a data
Mhm.
visualization that we put on their dashboards. And the next up, linear and logistic regression. Both are easily done in Microsoft Excel. And the quality of models is exactly the same as comes out of Python or R or SAS or SPSS or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So those four things right there are going to get you really long way in those business situations. And you can do them all in
Mhm.
Excel, right? As long as you don't have too many rows, you don't have too many columns, you're good.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Like logistic regression is incredibly powerful. For example,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I know a very large e-commerce company that's one of the models they use for very important, on-site stuff. And they tried a bunch of other approaches, and like, well, this seems to work really well, and it's really simple. It's literally just exponential functions, and that's it. So
Yeah.
it's
Scales
it's math.
well,
Scales well.
right? Very quick predictions, scales well. There's a certain level of explainability. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to teach people about odds ratios,
Yeah.
but other than that, I mean, it's relatively explainable compared to like using SHAP with XGBoost or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, good luck explaining that to even data scientists sometimes.
Yeah,
It's interesting. Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right though. Like the data science crowd, that's one group of people, but the vast majority of people aren't data scientists, and Excel is what they use. And there's just so much latent power in it. It's kind of crazy. Like I came from Excel, right? Like that's what I cut my teeth on back in the day. I still have muscle memory of probably the keyboard controls somewhere. Open it up, I'll just be like, and it's there's so much power. I think even back in the day, right? I was doing quite a bit of like linear programming and all that fun stuff in there, and it just works
yeah. I
really
mean,
well.
our Excel is by far and away the world's most popular operations research tool for optimization
Oh yeah.
problems, right? By far. I mean, jeez.
Oh, it was great. Actually, back in the day, I was a bit peeved because they used to have the analysis tool pack. I think back in the day, in the early 2000s, is actually more robust, and then they gutted it for some reason. You had to get a third party tool to do a lot of this stuff. I can't remember
Hmm.
what it was called, but yeah, stuff like Solver. Maybe they put it back in, but there was a few years where like none of this stuff was available. And it was just like WTF? Like I need
Hmm.
this, and I don't want to pay for this other one. So
Yeah,
but
solvers there. It's separate from the analysis tool pack and has been
yeah, yeah.
at least since 2000 Excel 2010. Um,
Okay,
yeah, the analysis tool pack is
yeah,
something I love and evangelize.
it's great,
It's actually pretty scary how many Excel users are not aware of it, right?
right?
Because if you're creating a reasonably small linear regression model, maybe 10, 12 predictors, something like that, which is quite frankly, if you're trying to explain it to a business user, an executive or something like that, anything beyond 12, tends to be real problematic anyway. You can
Yeah,
it makes creating a linear regression model like quick and easy. It provides you a nice little GUI to go through and click all your columns and all that I mean, the analysis toolpack is awesome, and it has interfaces for descriptive statistics and
oh yeah.
t-tests and ANOVA, all kinds of stuff.
Super powerful.
Yeah.
And it's kind of all you need for a lot of stuff. I mean,
It is, right? As long as you know that you're applying the right test to your data set, it's all you need. It's good
it
stuff.
helps to know. This is where I think it does help to have at least an understanding of statistics, math. Because if you try and blindly apply this stuff, you might be in for a world of hurt if you don't know what you're doing. Like you say with linear regression, for example, you had too many features. For example, I mean, your R squared is going to look really, really good for all the wrong
Mm.
reasons because just how that
Right?
works,
Yeah, because you have
right?
to
So
explain to people like, look, adjusted R squared will penalize you for extra features, but
yeah,
R squared does not. It always goes up.
right. Yeah, it's like, wow, that's a great model. So
Yeah. So if you want to be like, you want to be a little, duplicitous in your next review, you can be like, look, my R squared is awesome. You'd be like, shh. I didn't report adjusted R squared. I reported R squared to my boss.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and here's the thing though, is like it's not as hard to get to get the kind of knowledge that you need to apply these techniques effectively in the business context. I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of a gentleman by the name of Jim Frost, and he sells books. And he's a statistician, but he writes statistics books aimed at a broad audience. And like he has a
That's
book
cool.
on linear regression. He has a book on hypothesis testing, and he teaches you everything you need to know. He teaches you about all the gotchas and everything you need to check for and all that kind of stuff. But he doesn't necessarily say, look, okay, you're going to take your matrix and you're going to invert it, and this is how you come up, with your ordinary least square solution. He doesn't go into that level of detail because like you don't really need it in a business context. You
Yeah.
absolutely need to check all the assumptions that linear regression makes. Absolutely. And he covers all that in detail, but you don't need to understand all that low level math. It
I'm
doesn't
looking at
hurt,
some of
but
his
it's not required.
I'm looking at some of his books online here. It looks like he started publishing 2020 or something like that. But he's got some killer books. Great
Yeah,
reviews.
he's got a great blog too. His blog is
Oh, nice.
very, very extensive in terms of its coverage.
Cool. Shout out to Jim Frost. That's dope. Are you gonna write any books?
Yeah, it's on my bucket list. And I look at you and how much success you've been having with your book. And I'm
Oh, thank
like,
you.
man, if I get a small sliver of what Joe's doing, I'll be all right. I'll be just fine.
Careful what you wish for.
Hey man, I want to go to Australia and talk about my book.
I gave a talk last night and talked about my book. It was it's I don't know, it's a weird thing. I would think it's what I find interesting about book writing is like you're basically the same person you were, the day before the book came out, right? And then suddenly the book comes out and now you're you know, expertise is foisted upon you and all this stuff. And it's a weird thing for me to grapple with, I think, still. Some the kind of guy who, I tend to try and stay more low key and just, I don't know, just have I don't know, interesting or very uninteresting things to say typically. But
I don't know about
the
that.
thing is you gotta like make sure that you're I would say what happened with me was a fluke, right? With like that was kind of right place, right time in a lot of ways. Obviously the market's going to determine if your book's good, but in a lot of cases it's like there's just an element of randomness that just happens. And but you got to take advantage of the opportunity too. But I would say, like, for somebody like you, I mean, you're at the spot with your expertise, and I think your credibility where a book would just do absolutely amazing, and it would, catapult you to a different level. So,
Yeah, and I would hope so. Insofar as I would like the book to be useful to people, right? So
yeah,
insofar as sales translates to it helping people, that would be what I'm interested in.
yeah.
Which is why I give away so much content for free, like so many people do. It's because like you want to help people first and foremost if you can.
Well, I
You want,
remember what you had videos way back in 2014 or something like that on YouTube that
yeah,
have a lot of views, like millions of views. Which is
yeah,
pretty cool.
and it was exactly right place, right time, just like you were
Yeah.
describing. I built those on a lark, and if you watch them,
Hmm.
I cringe when I watch them now. I'm like, oh, those are so bad. But lots of people have watched them over the years and they find them helpful, which is really, really cool. And like I said,
Yeah.
I just started it on a lark. A friend of mine says, look, hey, you should record some of this stuff and put it on YouTube because other people are going to be interested in it. I'm like, okay. So I just had ScreenFlow on my Mac at the time, and I just,
ScreenFlow.
yeah, man.
That's funny. It's old school.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting though. I think a lot of this does start off as a lark, right? I was talking to Josh Starmer, if you know who he is, the
Oh, yeah.
Stats Quest.
Stats Quest guy.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and he's killing it now. But I think when he started, he was making videos for the 9 people in his biology lab. That was it. It had nothing to do with, oh, I'm going to start a famous, YouTube channel about statistics. That was not the motivation. It was literally to educate 9 people because he kept doing these classes
Mm-hmm.
for all the people in his lab about stats. He's like, why don't I just make a video and you can just watch it there? And then, other people started watching it, and then things happened, right? And I think what happened to you seems very, very similar, just in your own way. You post a video, I think it was like data science with R or something like that. I think it was
Yeah.
a video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like a 7-part series, and each video was like over an hour long. So,
Which is crazy too, because like it's not even
right?
YouTube friendly content. It's an hour. So,
Right. Yeah. It tells you what I know. I mean, I knew nothing, right? Like I had like no thumbnails that were creative and not, I mean, it was just like some dude just recording himself talking on screen.
no, that's exactly what it was.
This is exactly what it was. Even Josh's early stuff was way better than mine. I mean,
Oh, funny.
without a doubt. Oh yeah. Josh kind of knew what he was doing like from the get-go, and he got better, obviously more polished, obviously, because
Yeah.
he got more experience, but he was like leaps and
And he
bounds.
got an instrument, right? The main thing is he plays music. So
Right, he's like,
I'm kidding.
he's a musical statistician. That's, he's a rock star
Yeah.
statistician.
But I think you hit it at the right time though, because data science was sort of coming into the vogue around 2014.
Mhm.
I think it was starting to hit kind of red hot temperatures and stuff. And
And
it was
R was more popular than Python at that point for data
it
science
was
in
it
particular,
was.
so that certainly helped as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So right, yeah, you can't underestimate just the power of timing, right? Because like
Oh,
a
yeah.
video like yours, if you put it out today, it would get like one view or something, which would
No.
be like you watching it.
You'd be watching it, sending my mom, "Hey, mom, watch my video. Will you like it,
Which is
please?"
she like watch 2 seconds. Like whatever. Yeah, it's fascinating. I feel like a lot of content's like that. Just in general, like a lot of my friends who become really successful content creators, I think it's almost by accident in some ways, especially if you look at their early videos. Like was a Seattle data guy, my friend Ben Rogajan. He's really popular with data
Mhm.
engineering content on YouTube, but like his early videos were definitely kind of yeah, they're better now. So that's how it is with every one of us. I think I haven't really tried ever to make like course videos. I just do podcasts and stuff, so I'm a bit different and whatnot. But yeah, it's cool to see though, man.
Yeah, it's like I do like creating content. I don't like I've thought about doing a podcast, for example, but I don't know if I could be. It takes a lot of commitment, right? To book people and do all that stuff. So hats off to you and Matt for all the work you've been doing, and of course now you've got your own solo podcast as well. I mean,
Yep.
it's one of those kinds of things where I'm like, could I really do it? I don't know. So I'm not going to try at this point.
It's a commitment, dude. It's like for me, it feels like second nature now. But I'm sure like making the videos you do feels like second nature. If I were to try and make a course video, say, which I have in the past, I know what it takes. It's a lot of work, right? And it's
Yeah.
you got to record, and if you happen to be the unlucky person doing the editing, you get to do that too. And it's just
Oh,
there's
that's me.
just
I
a lot
do
that
it
goes
all.
into it. Hmm.
Yeah, and the editing is definitely that's the part people don't maybe they tend to underestimate, especially if they, for example, if they want to get on YouTube, because you have
Mm.
to make sure you're editing to like keep people's attention. Like
Yeah.
in 2014, I could get away with an hour and a half video of me just talking, no screen flow, but not these days.
It's changed, man.
Oh
It's
yeah,
so especially in the data science field, it's so competitive with content, and I mean it's in the nicest possible way because I don't think it's not competitive in a zero sum game sort of way. It's just competitive in terms of who's going to rank higher in content, on the algorithm. So
yeah, and that's like, for example, so the videos that I've created in the past couple of years on YouTube, I did SEO. I did search engine
mm,
optimization. I looked at competing videos, what keywords are going to happen, what are the thumbnails that seem to work. You have to put all that in there, because if you don't grab attention like right at the beginning, right, your videos, YouTube might pop it up in the search rankings just to experiment with it to see how it's going to go. And if people are not like engaging with it, they'll just drop you down the ranking list,
yep,
and then you disappear.
disappear, and then it's just yeah. 'Cause how many? It's some ungodly amount of videos uploaded to YouTube every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, you want to, for YouTuber people that are interested in creating a YouTube channel, you definitely want to niche down, right? Do your
Mm,
research, niche down, especially if you're in the data analytics, data science, data engineering space, right? You want to niche down. You want to look at, how can I differentiate myself so I can get eyeballs, so I can get the opportunity from the YouTube algorithm to get eyeballs,
hmm. Yeah, you've
Yeah.
done a good job at that, though. I think 'cause you're kind of zigging while other people zag, right? You're talking about Excel and R, and I think more practical stuff versus here's how you make like GPT on Excel or something. It'd be like kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'm because this is of course. I mean, how can we not talk about GPT, right? I
No,
mean,
let's talk
geez.
about it. I mean, four just came
Um,
out the other day, so
yeah, 4 just came out the other day, and I mean, it's going to be a game changer,
oh
right?
yeah,
It's going to be a game changer. But like so many things in the space, it's going to get a disproportionate amount of volume, whether that's on social media or on the news or in magazines or whatever sort of media channel that you like. It's going to be an outsized amount of volume relative to where the vast majority of organizations are actually at in terms of their usage of something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Microsoft's like, look, we're going to roll, the previous version in a bang right away. Even if it's like ends up doing like really funky, weird stuff
Yeah.
in the beta, but they can do that. They're Microsoft. But you look at like the Fortune 1000, for example, how many of those companies are really in a position to roll something like that out that fast?
Mm-hmm.
Willing to take the brand risk, willing to do the technology investment, have the infrastructure, all the things. And it's a fraction. So I think it's going to be very disruptive technology. But it's going to take a long time for it to permeate down into most organizations. So I don't focus a lot on it as a result of that, because the people that I work with, the clients I talk to, the people that that ping me, they are so far away from GPT-4 in production. I mean, some of them don't even have KPIs that they actually use to manage their processes for.
Well, you don't need them anymore. GPT will just make them up for you. So,
okay,
it's interesting. In Office though, isn't Microsoft rolling out GPT functionality within Excel, for example?
I can't imagine they're not. I think I just saw Google announce that they're putting generative AI and all of the G Suite stuff. So or whatever they call it.
I felt so bad for Google because they made that announcement, and then OpenAI is like, "Oh yeah, we have an announcement too. GPT-4 is out." Then they just suck the oxygen out of the room. And poor Google's like, "Anyway, never mind." So.
Poor Google. This is Satya's like, look, we're going to spend 10 billion on this because we want to be on that hype train.
Yeah. He's such a good CEO. Satya.
Oh,
yeah. I rank him up there as probably one of the best CEOs of all time. So that's
what
he did with turning around Microsoft. It's awesome.
Yeah, I left Microsoft at the end of 2016, and I try not to think too much about if I had stayed.
Oh, might have been different. One of my friends, they got hired at Microsoft to be a Python DevRel, I think back in 2016 or 2015 or something. And I was like, why would you go there? It's such an unlikely place. And now you fast forward to today, and I can make a pretty strong argument that Microsoft is probably the most, beloved by devs now. VS Code is now the most widely used IDE out there, and GitHub and everything else. It's like, what happened?
Because I used to use Python. Right? People don't believe that, but I did use Python back in 2014-ish. I used R and Python. I just went back and forth. For example, anything with text at that time, NLTK and Python, that's what I used.
Mm-hmm.
It was PyCharm. PyCharm was like the baseline back then, and now it's like VS Code everywhere. I'm like, whoa, man,
it's great. VS Code kicks ass.
Right? Because the Python community back then would be like holding up a little cross symbol, going, "No, Microsoft, oh." But now,
back then, what I was using Sublime, and before that, I think BB Edit, and
you were hardcore.
Yeah. And TextMate, that was the other one back in the day that was like popular, I remember. But then it's just, VS Code just came out, and it's like, we have this little thing too you can try out. And now I think it's more of an exception of who's not using VS Code, for a lot of stuff. So.
I haven't got on the VS Code bandwagon yet. I will.
Okay, so there's Dave.
I will admit, I'm I'm a notebook guy, right? For the work, a lot of the work I do, I don't need a full blown IDE for doing for doing analytics.
Because when you're in R, are you just using like RStudio then?
I do use RStudio.
That's good enough.
That's good enough, but I don't build packages, and I don't make super fancy project structures and that sort of thing. I use version control, of course, but generally speaking, when you're doing analytics, you're not really doing a lot of hardcore software engineering, right?
Right.
It's overkill. Why would you worry about that sort of thing?
It would be weird.
Like, for example, I very rarely write my own functions in R because the tidyverse gives me everything I need.
It's
already there, right? So I just find the function that I need and use theirs instead. I don't really write loops because you got per and all kinds of things in the R space, that sort of thing. Python's kind of similar. It's a lot more clunky, but you got something similar with pandas and the other supporting libraries as well.
I still go back to R though. I always call it like the hand calculator for stats. So if I need to do stats, and I don't want to use Excel, then I'm using R. That's just how
Yeah.
it is still. It's just everything's right there. T.test is that I don't need to import anything. It's just all the
Right.
basic stuff is there. Data frames are baked in from day one, right?
Yeah.
No imports.
Yep. Right. Linear regression, logistic regression, all your statistical tests are
Yep.
one-liners. Data frames are built right into the base data frames are built right into the language. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the way I always liken it to is folks that are like looking at them like, do you use SQL? Well, of course I use SQL because it's the easiest way to work with tables, whether it's in a relational database or some big data solution like Spark, doesn't matter. I'm using SQL in some form. Well, yeah, because SQL is built from the ground up to work with tables of data. Excel's the same way. R is the same way. Python was a general purpose object-oriented programming language, and they bolted stuff on. So it's a little more clunky as a result of that. But
Yep. It is what it is. And that's just
It is what it
too.
is.
There's like different tools for different jobs, right? And it's just,
right. If I was in the business of building object-oriented software from the ground up these days, Python would be what I would pick most likely. Even though C++ still holds a very special place in my heart. No client's gonna sign me on board to build a software system with C++ these days.
well, you get reprimanded for not knowing the differences of pointers. So,
right. Or virtual destructors. When do you need a virtual destructor? There you go. Now you're talking.
Oh man, that's fun. Yes, I mean, what are you up to these days? I mean, you giving a lot of trainings, doing a lot of videos. Like, what's the day in the life of Dave?
Yeah, these days. So I do hands-on consulting work. So like I have clients and I do all kinds of things for them, ranging from helping them do data migrations, data cleaning, migration data, all the way up to and including, building production machine learning models and deploying them for them, everything in between. So I do that. That's a good chunk of my day. And then I do teach. And I go to conferences and I teach live courses, and I am building a couple new courses right now. So I'm real super busy. I'll be working this weekend.
Nice.
Build new courses in Python, by the way.
What?
Yes. Yeah. I'll be teaching at a conference in May, and I'll be teaching courses in R and Python the same week. Yeah. It just finally got to the point where enough people were asking me like, Dave, we love the way you teach. We love the way you build courses and content, but we can't do the R thing, man. It's got to be Python. So I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, fine.
Man, well, he held on long enough, so it's good. And
well, like I said, I used Python back in the day. It's not like I'm anti-Python. It's just like everyone just seems to default to it without actually thinking through what they really need.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, do you really need Python, or is R sufficient? And especially because R is a lot easier for people to learn who don't necessarily have an object-oriented programming background.
Right.
Like if you're a BI team and you use SQL all the time, the transition from SQL to the Tidyverse is like, it's dead easy. It almost looks exactly like SQL. So it makes it so much easier for people to transition.
Oh, for sure. What I noticed too, I mean, I've been writing Python for ages, and it's when I see data scientists or analysts write Python too, it's interesting. It's very scripty, right? So there's not, I don't see a lot of classes, for example. I don't think people sometimes know what a class is. They're just write functions and, but if it gets a job done, it gets a job done, right? But it's interesting how Python's taught.
Yeah, especially with pandas. I mean, I think pandas is a great example of the scripty nature of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Matt Harrison.
Oh yeah, he's a local in Salt Lake. He's a friend.
Yeah. So Matt Harrison, I was like, God, has pandas improved in terms from a coding perspective since I used it last years ago? And I found Matt Harrison because I was looking for it, and he's a big proponent of method chaining. And for some reason, pandas is not taught, generally speaking, with method chaining, which is insane to me because it makes the code so much more readable. And it's and Python is an object-oriented programming language, and method chaining is a tried and true technique for making your object-oriented code look better. But for some reason, the Python community seems to resist it, and I just don't get it because I'm like, that's the way to do it, right? If you're going to make pandas even halfway as easy to use as dplyr and R, you got to use method chaining, because the way they teach it now, it's like you see these lines of code in like Python notebooks for pandas, and it's like 180 characters long. All the things they're doing, you're like, what?
Right, which violates PEP 8 because it's like 79 characters in your line or your toast,
Right.
right? So
Right.
yeah, and then it's like in pandas is interesting too because if you don't do method chaining, then it's like df equals blah 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 blah. The next one's df equals this. So like, but each time you execute df, that creates a new instance of a df. Last time I checked, and so from your memory standpoint, it gets real funky.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, especially if you're explicitly forcing a deep copy, so you can avoid all the the panda warnings, that come up from NumPy underneath, right?
mm-hmm.
And if a lot of folks who learn Python, right? This is the C++ guide coming out. You don't understand about memory management, right? Right. Garbage collection. When are you actually recovering that memory? So if there for a time, your notebook could potentially be having 6-7 copies of the of the data frame in memory simultaneously, right? Anyway, that's
all called df. Yeah,
all called df, right? Just different memory addresses, right? But as far as you're concerned as the coder, it's all df. Yeah,
it's
so
crazy.
I'm a big fan of like trying to. It seems weird in the Python community that people don't want it to be an object-oriented programming language. They want it to be a functional scripting language. Well, there's already one for that. It's called R, by the way. And what's nice about R is everything's immutable, so you don't have to worry about the copy semantics like you have to worry about in using pandas, for example.
Yeah, it's true. And Python definitely has some functional elements to it, I would say, but there's sort of a religious chasm between like whether you use like the built-in map and filter and reduce methods, for example, which I can't remember if Guido van Rossum hated those or not. I don't remember the argument, but there's something about it that didn't like. Then you have list comprehensions is the other one. You could sort of get away doing that kind of stuff, and there's which is funny because Python was it was written to there's like one way to do things, for readability purposes, and suddenly there's like a bajillion ways to do things, and that's the one thing. Readable code's one thing where I'm kind of a stickler when it comes to Python, for example, right? Like PEP 8's there, which outlines the standards for doing it. I've been known to be a bit of a bit harsh on people that don't do that. So
yeah, I mean,
rules and use them.
Yeah, and that's where, like, for example, I'm like, for a lot of folks, I know they get a lot of hate, but Jupyter notebooks are for analytics most of this time. It's just fine. It's really all you need.
Yeah.
Right? Now, of course, name them, document them. Use the facilities available in Jupyter. But like, do you really need to spin up like a hardcore project with a whole bunch of like file structures like you would in a normal software engineering project? No, it's a waste of time and effort. Right.
Yeah. What's interesting in programming too is there's been this kind of two forks in the road, right? The software engineering route, which is like, clean code, blah, 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 blah. Then over here in data science land, it's like, yeah, whatever. Just get the answers. And so, the formalities of software engineering, like as you were taught when, or you were learning it, and it's ingrained in you. How does that feel when you see code written by people who aren't engineers?
I've certainly gotten used to it. So 20-year-old Dave would be like, get a rope for me saying that, but you get used to it because especially if you spend any time as an architect, you start worrying about ROI a lot, right? Return on investment. And software engineering is not cheap. And it needs to be cost justified, right? So the classic metric is, look, to make something highly reusable, it needs to be reused like 5 times, let's say, for it to actually justify the additional cost. And most analytics work is not reused 5 times. Right. So it kind of makes sense from that perspective that you wouldn't invest in, right? Especially in the Python world, right? I'm going to write my own objects, I'm going to mock out some interfaces so that I can do all the unit testing I want to do. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Now, that being said, we shouldn't have df equals 75 times in one cell in your Jupyter notebook either. But right? I don't need you to be like doing ABC stuff, right? Abstract base class stuff in Python to write a simple analysis. That's just overkill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I'm seeing like some people are posting about like clean code for data scientists. I think if you're working on a team, it's definitely important to have standards. But as you say, the ROI is important too. It's something I struggle with. I feel like it's for stuff that's put into production. That's where I start getting a bit more hardcore about it. Yeah, absolutely. But if you're doing EDA, for example, it's like I think you're getting paid to get answers, not fuss around with a bunch of stuff. So
Well, it's like we just talked about, right? With Excel. Well, not just talked about, but earlier. 750 billion, 2 billion, who knows? A lot of Excel users. The vast majority of those people are doing some sort of data analysis in some form,
right.
even if it's as simple as a pivot table. The vast majority of data analyses that are conducted every day worldwide are solo analyst scenarios where the code is never going to be reused. It's never even going to be looked at by anybody else, right? Which is why Excel is so useful. And why people's level of need of reproducibility in Excel is relatively low, much to the chagrin of software engineering types, of course. But if you do say, look, I'm going to make reproducible stuff, whether that's an R script, maybe a Python script, or like a Jupyter notebook, the ability to be, the need for it to be shared widely and easily reused from a software engineering frame of reference is astronomically low. It's such a small percentage of what actually happens every day. Now, granted, if you are on a production data science team, that's completely different. But the vast majority of people, once again, that are doing data analyses, they're not doing that. It's one-off,
Right.
Solo analyst scenario.
Right.
And that's not popular like when you're on social media, right? Because everyone's talking about the big stuff. Everyone wants to take, the proverbial FANG perspective that's the only way to do things. And for a lot of organizations, that's just simply not true.
Yeah. It's, but there's a temptation though, I think, for people because they kind of idolize the the FANGs or the mangas, whatever they are now, and it's like, well, obviously, I have to do that kind of stuff if we ever aspire to become a company like that, and so it puts a lot of tension on people, I think.
And I wonder if the state of California made this worse, Joe, because now they got to post salary ranges for jobs, and people are like, data engineer goes from 150K to 800,000 a year. They're like, that's the kind of job I want.
Right. Well, you got to get it first.
Right. I mean, like, obviously that's probably like staff level engineer at the high end. I'm like, there's like five, 6 people maybe in the world, maybe they could get that kind of job, but still people are like, ooh.
Oh, for sure. Actually, we did a podcast this morning with Felix GV. He's with the principal staff software engineer over at LinkedIn. And just the level of problems he's describing that he's solving, he called it described as multi-planetary software. I'm like, yeah, you're operating on distributed systems at a level that like not a lot of people even contemplate, right? But he was kind enough to say too, for most companies, MySQL, Postgres databases, totally fine. You don't need to use our open source stuff for your
right. And I mean
company.
And by the way, I like the fact that he's a principal staff. That tells you like he's just not a staff engineer, he's a principal staff engineer.
Oh yeah, no, this guy
right?
he's
up there.
He's rare. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like when I worked in the SQL Server team at Microsoft, we had like a few like DEs, distinguished engineers that worked like on the core optimization engine of SQL Server. And like there's only like a handful of people on the planet that kind of do that kind of work. It's like it's probably not going to be Dave Langer, even when he was 22. There's no way he was going to be that guy. Boop, just pop that bubble.
Well, you're a distinguished teacher now, so
I'm a distinguished something.
20-year-old Dave Langer. I mean, how what year would that have been? That would have been back in the
let's see, that would have been in the 90s.
1990s,
yeah.
Oh, that was a fun time.
Oh yeah.
I found it. What's that?
I did the .com startup the first time around. So I've worked at a number of startups through different phases of my career. So I've seen a lot of stuff.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, that was back, we're a few years apart. I wouldn't say by much, actually. It's kind of surprising, but I was thinking about the 90s a lot lately, and it was interesting because I felt like it was the last time that we were like, you could be unplugged from the world. Like, still you had landlines. The internet still hadn't really pervaded. And I had an early internet connection, so it was a bit different for me. But you had the option of just not being online, and I and I think it was a fun time. It's interesting looking back because that was sort of the last time that you had, I think a lot of the liberties to kind of just do your own thing and not be scrutinized online 24/7. So
yeah, most people had dial-up. If they had internet at all, they had dial-up.
Yep.
everybody and their brother was trying to start up an auction site, right? Wasn't
Yeah.
just wasn't eBay, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a different time. Yeah. It's a different time than nowadays, right? No smartphones.
No phones. You had a brick phone. Maybe if you wanted to get a cell
Right.
phone or something.
Right. You're like Gordon Gekko
Right.
on Wall
So
Street with that big old brick phone, kind of thing that costs like $3,000 just for the phone. And then
I actually
this,
have one in my garage.
oh wow, look at that.
Yeah, my dad's like, "Do you want this?" I'm like, "That's a good, nice looking brick. Yeah, I'll take that." So
I might give that to a museum at some point.
that's what I think I'm gonna do. Yeah, it's more just to show kids like, "Hey, this was that thing you fit in your pocket now." So you had to lug this thing around.
Right.
It's a carry on for your flight. Yeah, it was a different time too. Yeah, the .com one was fascinating. It kind of felt like last week with the whole Silicon Valley Bank thing. It felt like 2008 and 2000 had a kid. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Right. Financial collapse mixed in with a bunch of, tech startups at the same time. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I
mhm.
like that.
It was nuts, man. I mean, all of a sudden it was like, okay, cool. So I think there might be a lot of layoffs come Monday. Thankfully, there weren't. Thankfully, it was averted at the last second. But
I, all joking aside, I could feel I could empathize with the situation because two true stories back in my .com startup days. The first .com startup I worked for, we showed up on Friday, which was payday, and the CTO of the company said, "Go to your bank, close your account, get your deposit. The company's check bounced to ADP, and they're going to be reversing all of your payroll deposits later today."
all of them.
Yeah, the company, and you're like, "Oh, by the way, we're today's your last day. We're shuttering everything." So
Wow.
I thought that was a little bit duplicitous. So I was like, "Crap." So I went to my parents and I was like, "Hey, can you give me a small cash infusion?" Because this is back in my 20s. I was like, "Because I need to make my mortgage payment and I don't have enough money now." Luckily,
Mortgage
my
payments
parents.
back then was like what, $20 or something.
Yeah,
So
well, I'm just just saying, right? I mean,
yeah.
that was the first one. Luckily, my parents were like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And I found another job and got a signing bonus. I was able to pay them back, which was cool. But it was an
Mm,
interesting experience.
that's crazy.
And then the next start, so I went from that startup to another .com startup, and I worked there for a while, and that was 2000. That's when things
Okay.
crashed. So the capital just dried up. There was no more capital to be had, and the company actually had a business model. They were actually generating revenue, right? So they had a potential to actually grow, but they were running out of capital, and the capital markets dried up at the same time. So at the end, they were like, and I kid you not, "Guys, we're working on getting more capital. We don't have any money. We can't pay you in cash. If you want office furniture out of the office, you could take that in lieu of actually being paid."
Probably some nice chairs out of that.
I was like, so I kind of empathize when I started reading about SVB, right? Because I'm like, I've lived through the fact I worked for a startup and
Yeah.
they couldn't make payroll. I've lived through it twice, and it's not
Jesus.
fun. It sucks. So,
No. No, it's not fun for the employees. It's not fun for the founders. I mean, they
mhm.
they they, they don't want to be in this situation. It's like they wake
No.
up one day and it's like, I chose evil. I'm gonna screw over my employees today for sure.
And unlike
Right,
unlike a lot of the .com startups in the day, they were actually generating revenue, actual revenue.
right,
They just needed enough runway to build the business up, and they just couldn't get the capital.
right.
Yeah.
And last week, I was talking to many founder friends, and one of them I actually sent. I wired some money to angel invest in one of the companies, to Silicon Valley Bank of all places, and about a day later, I'm like, so hopefully you're getting your money out of this bank, right? He's like, oh yeah, get going on that. I'm like, yeah, you should get going on that. That'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
So but in a lot of cases you couldn't. After a certain time, it's like if you didn't have your wires through, then
Mhm.
then you're kind of at the mercy of the FDIC at that point. And that was a really scary thing because I know a lot of I talked to a lot of people over the weekend, and the discussions were very real. It's like I might have to start laying people off very
Yeah.
quickly in order
Yeah.
to preserve cash because I have no idea when it's coming in. And but now it's kind of nuts because like yeah, they're fine for now. Silicon Valley Bank is they think they just reincorporated under a new name, but now all of a sudden it's like every other bank in the universe is having trouble. So we'll see what happens. It's
Yeah, we'll see. And
fascinating.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's like first thing I thought of was like, young 20 somethings working for these startups, and like they probably don't have a
Yeah.
big cash cushion. And if they don't get paid, that could be a real hardship for them.
Oh yeah. Well, you compare it
Personally.
personally for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad for people, the younger people these days. It's not like the good old days when you and I were growing up where college was cheap and, expenses were low. You didn't have like the inflation in basically every area that you do now. It's like, it's
Yeah.
hard to get ahead. It's so
Yeah.
hard.
I went to the UW, the University of Washington in Seattle, and I think I paid, as an in-state resident, I paid $1,200 a quarter full time for
Uh-huh.
for tuition.
Right.
$1,200. That's it. It's like
Yeah.
it's insane
That's
how
like a
much
book.
right? It's like, oh, book.
I think mine at the University of Utah back in the day was very similar. It was like laughably cheap.
Yeah.
And now, I look at it, I look at what my kids might have to be paying, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So trying to stay in state and do this stuff.
Right.
It's nuts, but also, get a career where, you have a chance of like being able to do something with it.
Yeah.
So,
Stay
but
in state, major in computer science or maybe statistics or something like that. Go get yourself a nice high paying job, right? This will
yeah,
resonate with you. Being an actuary is still a really good career.
it is,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of gatekeeping to get that fellowship too. So if you wanted to go that route,
Well,
the other thing,
I've been
what's
hearing
that?
that they have a hard time getting people to come into actuarial sciences now
Oh, I'm
because
sure. Well,
everyone
it's not
wants to go
data.
do the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not data science.
You can't do machine
Reserving.
learning.
I don't want to reserve. Reserving's boring. I don't want to do that.
No, it's a good. I mean, the actuary stuff though, think it teaches you like a really good mindset and
Mhm.
good skills. What I'm trying to tell my kids though is, look, I mean, there's other things you could do too, like go learn a trade, like become a carpenter, become a contractor. I mean, nobody wants to do that
Plumber.
stuff anymore, and it pays well. Plumber,
Be a
fantastic
plumber.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you make good money. There's a shortage of the skilled trades. It's kind of nuts. I
Absolutely.
mean, if I weren't doing what I'm doing, I mean, honestly, I mean, I used to do that kind of work, so it's like not that big of a deal. Except your body will probably break at some point. But apart from that, but one of my kids, I don't, he does what he wants to do. He's also 9, but I'm like, I think he's got what it takes to probably be a really good contractor and running a company doing that. He's really good at sales. He convinces me to do all kinds of stuff that I know I shouldn't do, buy him things and stuff. So, but he's also, he builds stuff all the time. Right. So I'm just like, college isn't the only route you have to go. In fact,
Absolutely.
especially with automation and GPT, I think, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with white collar jobs and AI sort of gutting out, I would say, a lot of kind of road activities. It'll create new things, but there's always that squishy period where it's a bit awkward with the transition. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agreed. Like copywriting, I'd be like, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes over time.
Book writing,
Book writing, right? Hopefully in-person teaching still remains, as long as you teach something that Chat GPT can't do very well.
Yeah. Well, in-person teaching is interesting. I mean, I was thinking about it through it's the nature of like in-person talks and presentations and teaching. And 'cause yesterday I was like, it's weird that people come like get together to hear people talk. It's like this, But then you look back throughout humankind, that's just kind of how it's been, and I don't know if they're
Yeah.
hardwired for that, but
We're social creatures, right?
mhm.
Most folks still think of being in real life, in person, as being a more quality based experience, even if the information they
Yeah,
get is exactly the same as opposed to like Zoom or something like that. They just prefer it. We're just social creatures.
yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true. Well, cool. I know we're coming up at the top of the hour here, so it's great chatting with you, man. It's I guess a big fan of what you're doing. So
Well, thanks for
keep
having
it
me
up.
on. Appreciate it.
Anytime. For people who want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Search David Langer. Usually the first search result that comes up on LinkedIn. You can also find my website, daveondata.com as well. And you can also search for me on YouTube, David Langer, and I'm the first search result that comes up as well.
Nice. Very cool. Well, awesome. Yeah, thanks to the audience, who likes this. And yeah, so the Joe Reese Show, like I said, new podcast. It's a chance for me to just talk to, my friends, sometimes talk to myself and the friends in my mind. So it's fun all around. So, yeah. Well, cool, Dave. It's great chatting with you. And yeah, take care, man.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.